In the outskirts of West Baltimore, where abandoned buildings and forgotten hopes decorated the streets, lived Jamal Carter, an 11-year-old boy with eyes that carried dreams bigger than his reality. His tiny bedroom, shared with two younger brothers, had walls decorated with magazine and newspaper clippings about Gervonta Davis, the champion who had grown up in the same tough streets. Each night after finishing his homework and helping his mother, Letitia, with household chores, Jamal repeatedly watched videos of Davis's fights on an old cracked cell phone he had received from his uncle. Letitia worked 2 jobs, during the day as a nursing assistant and at night cleaning downtown offices, to support her 3 children after their father, Marcus, had been imprisoned for drug possession 3 years earlier. Despite the visible exhaustion on her face when she arrived home at 10 o'clock at night, she always found energy to ask Jamal about his improvised training sessions in the building's basement, where he punched a bag made of old clothes stuffed with foam from discarded mattresses. The boy trained with a determination rare for his age, driven by the conviction that boxing was his path to lifting his family out of their reality. When he learned that Gervonta Davis would be holding an autograph session at the opening of a renovated boxing gym across town, Jamal felt his heart race as if he were about to enter the ring for the first time. The Royston Heights gym was almost a 2-hour bus ride from his home, in an area his mother considered dangerous for him to walk alone. The event would be on a Saturday, the day Letitia worked a double shift, and Jamal knew he couldn't ask her to miss work because of it. Every dollar was essential for rent and food. Determined to meet his idol, Jamal saved the few dollars he earned helping neighbors with simple tasks, collecting penny by penny for weeks. He didn't have money to buy new gloves. His biggest dream was to own a pair signed by Davis, but he hoped he could at least get an autograph in his sketchbook, where he had drawn every Davis move he could copy from videos. On the eve of the big day, as heavy rain fell outside, Jamal practiced in front of the cracked bathroom mirror how he would ask for the autograph without seeming desperate, trying to imagine what it would be like to come face to face with the man who proved someone from Baltimore could win. On Saturday morning, with the sky still dark and the cold autumn air penetrating through the poorly sealed window cracks, Jamal woke up before everyone else. He put on his best clothes, a black t-shirt already faded, with the silhouette of a boxer he had received in a school donation, and jeans with a small tear at the knee that he tried to disguise with a black pen. He left a note for his mother, explaining where he would be, and set off with his notebook, $17.45 and a heart overflowing with hope as he walked alone to the deserted bus stop that Saturday morning. The bus ride seemed endless to Jamal, who alternated between looking through the foggy window and rereading an interview with Davis cut out from an old magazine. When he finally reached his destination, his eyes widened at the sight of the line forming in front of the Royston Heights gym. Hundreds of people, many wearing official Gervonta Davis t-shirts that cost more than his mother earned in an entire day of work, anxiously waited to see the champion. Jamal felt his stomach sink as he realized he hadn't arrived as early as he thought, and that he might not even be able to enter the venue. With hesitant steps, the boy positioned himself at the end of the long line, noticing curious glances from some adults seeing an unaccompanied child. In front of him, 2 older teenagers, one carrying new boxing gloves in a box, talked excitedly about how they could sell any item autographed by the champion for a high price. Behind him, an entire family, father, mother, and 2 children, wearing brand-name clothes, discussed which photos would be best to take with the fighter. Jamal clutched his worn notebook to his chest, suddenly feeling small and out of place in that crowd. After 2 hours of waiting under the now punishing sun, the line had advanced only a few meters. Jamal's feet ached inside the tight sneakers. He had inherited from a school donation program, and his stomach growled with hunger, as he had left without eating anything to save what little money he had. That's when he heard the growing buzz and camera flashes, announcing Gervonta Davis's arrival. Standing on his tiptoes, Jamal briefly glimpsed his idol getting out of a gleaming black SUV, surrounded by security guards in dark suits and sunglasses, quickly waving to the crowd before entering through the gym's side door. Time passed slowly as the line moved forward, and Jamal observed people leaving with wide smiles, displaying photos, gloves, and autographed shirts. A gym employee passed by informing that each person would have only 1 minute with the champion and that no more than 2 items would be allowed for autographs. When the clock on the nearby church tower struck 3 in the afternoon, a man in an impeccable suit came out to announce that Davis would need to leave in an hour for another commitment and that probably not everyone would be able to get in. Calculating the speed of the line and his position, Jamal realized with a heavy heart that he would likely be among those left out. With growing desperation in his chest, Jamal abandoned his place in line and ran to the side entrance where he had seen Davis enter. A burly security guard blocked the door, but the boy hid behind a parked van, watching carefully. He saw when a man quickly came out to take a call, leaving the door slightly ajar for a few seconds. Without thinking twice, Jamal took advantage of the security guard's distraction with another insistent fan and slipped inside the building, his heart beating so hard it seemed like it would explode inside his thin chest. Inside the gym, Jamal found himself in a dimly lit corridor that smelled of fresh sweat and cleaning products. He could hear the noise of conversations and camera flashes coming from the main hall, where Davis was probably signing autographs. Walking cautiously, trying to look like he belonged there, the boy passed a room with new boxing equipment still in their packaging and reached a locker room area. He heard voices approaching and quickly hid behind a row of metal lockers, holding his breath. 2 men in suits entered, discussing Davis's tight schedule, mentioning that he would need to leave in 40 minutes to catch a flight to Las Vegas, where he would have a press conference the next day. One complained about the number of people in line and how it would be impossible to attend to everyone, while the other responded that this was the event organization's problem, not theirs. When they left, Jamal waited a few seconds before continuing his exploration, now with an even greater sense of urgency. His time was rapidly running out. Following the sound of voices and flashes, Jamal reached a half-open door that led to a break room. Peering through the crack, his heart almost stopped when he saw Gervonta Davis sitting on a couch, checking messages on his phone, while an assistant offered him a bottle of water. The champion looked smaller in person than on screens, but his presence was undeniably powerful. He wore a gray hoodie with his logo, black athletic pants and sneakers that certainly cost more than all the furniture in Jamal's home combined. What surprised the boy most, however, was noticing that Davis seemed tired, occasionally rubbing his eyes as his mother did after a long day of work. While observing, hesitant about how to approach his idol without being thrown out, Jamal heard someone approaching down the corridor. In panic, he pushed the door and entered the room, startling both Davis and his assistant. "Hey, who are you? How did you get in here?" asked the assistant, quickly standing up. Jamal froze, his eyes fixed on Davis, the notebook trembling in his hands. Before he could answer, another man entered and grabbed his arm, accusing him of having infiltrated. The boy didn't resist, but his eyes remained fixed on Davis, a mixture of fear and admiration stamped on his young face. To everyone's surprise in the room, Davis made a gesture with his hand, asking the security guard to wait. "Let him speak," said the champion, with a softer voice than Jamal had imagined. "What do you want, kid?" With his heart pounding and a dry throat, Jamal finally found his voice, quickly explaining that he had waited hours in line but realized he wouldn't be able to get in before Davis left. He told how he trained every day in the basement with an improvised bag, how his mother worked 2 jobs, and how Davis was proof that someone from Baltimore could make it in life. As he spoke, he opened his notebook, showing the meticulous drawings he had made of the champion's punches and defensive movements, each page a testimony to his devotion. A momentary silence filled the room when Jamal finished speaking. Davis looked at the notebook, slowly turning pages filled with detailed notes about boxing techniques, posture drawings, and even training schedules that the boy had created for himself. The champion recognized in those rough sketches a dedication that few adults demonstrated, let alone a child of that age. "What's your name, kid?" asked Davis, closing the notebook and looking directly into Jamal's eyes, who responded with a thread of voice, still intimidated by his idol's presence. Davis signaled for the security guard to release the boy's arm and asked everyone to leave the room, except Jamal. The assistant protested, reminding him of the tight schedule, but the champion was firm. "Give me 10 minutes," he said simply, and everyone obeyed, leaving the two alone. Davis indicated the couch beside him, inviting Jamal to sit. Hesitantly, the boy obeyed, still holding his notebook as if it were a shield. "So you train in the basement? Tell me more about that," asked the champion. In the following minutes, Jamal described his improvised gym, how he had studied each of Davis's movements through free videos on the internet, and how he dreamed of one day having real gloves to train properly, instead of wrapping adhesive tape around his hands. While listening, Davis carefully observed the boy, the worn-out sneakers, the visibly used but clean and well-kept clothes, and mainly the determination in his young eyes that was strangely familiar. He saw himself reflected in that boy, remembering his own childhood in Baltimore, the nights he went to bed hungry, the days he had to choose between going to school or helping at home. "Do you have a coach?" asked Davis. Jamal shook his head, explaining that he couldn't afford lessons and that no free gym was near his home. He mentioned that sometimes Mr. Wilkins, a former amateur boxer who lived in the same building, gave him some tips when his warehouse shift allowed. Davis suddenly stood up and went to a corner of the room where some sports bags were piled. He rummaged through one of them and returned with a pair of red training gloves. They weren't new but were in excellent condition. "These were mine when I started training with Coach Ford," he explained, extending them to Jamal, whose eyes widened in disbelief. The boy took the gloves with trembling hands, as if receiving a sacred relic. Davis then took a pen and signed each of them, adding a small message. "Keep your hands up and your feet moving. Never give up." Before Jamal could process what was happening, the champion picked up his phone and made a quick call, speaking in a low voice. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and in walked a middle-aged man with an erect posture and perceptive eyes whom Jamal immediately recognized: Calvin Ford, Davis's legendary trainer. Ford greeted the champion with a quick embrace before turning his attention to the boy, examining him with experienced eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. Davis briefly explained the situation and asked Ford to assess the boy's determination. The trainer asked Jamal some simple questions, asking him to demonstrate his boxing stance and some basic movements right there. Despite his nervousness, the boy executed the movements with surprising precision for someone without formal training, the fruit of countless hours observing and practicing alone. What happened in the days that followed seemed like a dream to Jamal and his family. On Monday after the meeting, Calvin Ford personally appeared at the building where they lived, accompanied by an assistant carrying a box of basic boxing equipment. Letitia, who had just returned from her morning shift, nearly fainted when she opened the door and found the famous trainer. Ford calmly explained how he had met Jamal and how the boy demonstrated a natural talent that deserved to be developed. He offered Jamal a full scholarship to train at his gym 3 times a week, including round-trip transportation, with the condition that the boy maintain good grades in school and exemplary behavior. While his mother talked with Ford in the small living room trying to process that unexpected opportunity, Jamal opened the box that the assistant had brought. Inside, he found not only the autographed gloves that Davis had given him, but a complete set of new equipment: hand wraps, mouthguard, shorts, training shirts, specific boxing shoes, and even a light punching bag that could be hung in his room. Under all this, there was an envelope with a handwritten letter from Davis, reaffirming his belief in the boy's potential and promising to follow his progress. At the end of the letter, there was a phone number with the instruction to use it, only in case of extreme necessity. The first training sessions were brutally difficult. Accustomed to practicing alone without technical corrections, Jamal discovered that many of his movements were incorrect and would need to be relearned from the beginning. His physical endurance, although impressive for a boy his age, fell far short of what was needed for the intense sessions at Ford's gym. Many nights Jamal arrived home so exhausted that he could barely eat dinner before falling asleep. His body sore, but his mind filled with new techniques and knowledge that he absorbed like a thirsty sponge. The news that a boy from West Baltimore had impressed Gervonta Davis enough to earn a scholarship with Calvin Ford spread quickly through the community. Local reporters showed up wanting to interview the family, but Ford was inflexible in protecting Jamal from premature exposure. "He's not a human interest story for you to exploit," he firmly told a particularly insistent journalist. "He is a developing athlete and needs space to grow." Davis, keeping his word, received regular updates on Jamal's progress, occasionally sending messages of encouragement when the boy faced difficulties or celebrating small victories when he mastered a new technique. 6 months after that fateful meeting, Jamal was unrecognizable, not just physically, with defined muscles beginning to replace his formerly thin body, but mainly in his confidence and discipline. At school, his teachers noticed the change in his focus and determination, his grades consistently improving each quarter. At home, he took on more responsibilities, helping his mother with his younger brothers, and even convincing her to allow him to start a small study group for other boys in the neighborhood who also dreamed of escaping the cycle of poverty and violence. The autographed gloves remained in a special box under his bed, taken out only on special occasions as a reminder of the day that changed his life. On the first anniversary of his meeting with Davis, Jamal participated in his first youth tournament, representing Ford's gym in the featherweight category. His brothers and mother were in the front row, Letitia having managed to trade her shift to not miss her son's debut. Nervousness was visible in his restless hands as he waited in the preparation area, wearing the gym's official uniform with his name embroidered on the back, a gift from Ford to celebrate his dedication during that year. His opponent, a boy 2 years older from a renowned Washington, D.C. gym, had more experience and an impressive record of early victories. The fight began with Jamal clearly on the defensive, studying his opponent's movements as Ford had taught him, absorbing some blows while looking for patterns and flaws. In the second round, he precisely applied the strategy they had planned, exploiting the opponent's tendency to lower his left guard after specific combinations. The crowd exploded when Jamal connected a perfect right hook, knocking down his opponent for the first time in the young Washington fighter's career. Although the adversary recovered and made the third round extremely disputed, the victory by points went to Jamal, earning his first trophy and the attention of observers in the youth circuit. Backstage, while celebrating with his family and gym colleagues, Jamal was surprised by the arrival of a familiar figure, not Davis in person, who was in training for a title defense, but his personal assistant, carrying a package and a phone. "He's watching via FaceTime and wants to talk to you," explained the man, handing the phone to Jamal. On the screen, Davis's smiling face appeared, with the noise of a training camp in the background. "I watched every round, young man. You kept your hands up and your feet moving exactly as I told you. I'm proud of you," said the champion, words that made Jamal's eyes water with emotion. The call was brief, but its impact lasting. The package contained a new pair of professional competition gloves, identical to those Davis used in his own fights, but in youth size. A card accompanied the gift, to remember that the work has just begun. Keep making Baltimore proud. That night, back in the small apartment that now felt much more like a home than before, Jamal sat on the edge of the shared bed, looking at the city through the window. The same abandoned buildings, the same dangerous streets were still there, but for the first time, he didn't see them as insurmountable barriers, but as part of a journey he was learning to navigate. During the following 2 years, Jamal's life followed a demanding but rewarding routine. School in the morning, training 3 times a week, study on the other days, and increasingly important competitions on weekends. Ford had become much more than a trainer. He was a mentor who taught not just about boxing, but about life, choices, and responsibility. "The ring is just a reflection of the world out there," he often said. "The discipline you learn here will determine how you deal with everything else." When Jamal turned 14, he already had an impressive record of victories and had become an example for other children in the community, especially his younger brothers, who now dreamed of their own paths to success. The big turning point came when an independent documentary filmmaker, intrigued by stories about the boy discovered by Davis and trained by Ford, proposed making a short film about Jamal's journey. Initially, Ford was against the idea, concerned about the additional pressure that exposure would bring. However, After conversations with Davis and especially with Letitia, who saw in documenting her son's story a way to inspire other children in similar situations, the trainer agreed on the condition that the filming would not interfere with Jamal's training or studies and that the family would have creative control over the final result. The filming lasted 6 months, capturing not just the dramatic moments of victories and defeats in the ring, but mainly the day-to-day life of a family working together to overcome adversities. The documentary showed Letitia now studying to become a registered nurse, thanks to a scholarship for single mothers that she obtained with Ford's help. Jamal's younger brothers improving in school, inspired by their older brother's example, and the gradual transformation of the community around them, with more children seeking sports and educational activities instead of the streets. The Chosen. Title was simple, More Than Gloves, a reference to the gift that had started it all, but which represented much more than sports equipment. When the documentary was selected for an independent film festival in New York, the entire Carter family was invited to the premiere. For Jamal, now 15 years old and about to compete in the National Youth Championship, it was the first trip outside of Maryland. The production had prepared everything, accommodation, transportation, formal clothes for the event, but nothing could prepare the family for the audience's reaction. The standing ovation at the end of the screening lasted several minutes, with many spectators visibly moved. Among them was Gervonta Davis, who had made a point of attending incognito, sitting discreetly at the back of the room, observing not just the audience's reaction, but mainly Jamal's face as he saw his story told in such a powerful way. Backstage after the session, Davis finally approached. Jamal, now almost the same height as his idol, hugged him tightly, without sufficient words to express his gratitude. "I didn't do this," said Davis, stepping back to look into the young man's eyes. "It was your hands, your feet, your mind, your heart. I just gave the gloves. You built the fighter." The conversation that followed was private, away from cameras and curious onlookers, just the two of them, the established champion and the promising rookie, sharing experiences that only someone who came from the tough streets of Baltimore could fully understand. The documentary's impact went far beyond the festival. Distributed online, it reached millions of views in a few days, generating a wave of support and initiatives. Boxing gyms across the country began offering scholarships to young people from underprivileged communities, inspired by Ford's model. Sports equipment companies sent donations to the community center that had been inaugurated in the old basement where Jamal used to train alone. Most significant, however, was the increase in school enrollments and the reduction in dropout rates among teenagers in the most vulnerable areas of Baltimore, a phenomenon that education specialists nicknamed the Jamal effect, tangible proof that positive examples could inspire real transformations. 3 years after the documentary's premiere, at 18 years old, Jamal was preparing for his transition to professional boxing. His body had fully developed, maintaining the extraordinary speed of his early years, but now combined with a striking power that made experienced opponents back away. Ford, always cautious with the development of his fighters, had meticulously planned each step of this new phase, ensuring that Jamal was ready not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally for the challenges of the professional circuit. The debut would be in a preliminary fight at a major event in Baltimore, where Davis would defend his world title, a full circle that didn't go unnoticed by any of those involved. In the week before the fight, Jamal received an unexpected invitation to visit a primary school in West Baltimore, the same one he had attended as a child. What he found there left him speechless. A completely renovated activities room had been transformed into a small boxing gym with basic but quality equipment for children between 8 and 12 years old. On the walls, besides photos of great champions, including Davis, there was an enlarged one of Jamal himself, holding his first autographed gloves. The principal explained that the after-school program had been funded by a partnership between Davis's foundation and local businesses, with the goal of offering children a healthy and disciplined alternative after school hours. While talking with the young students, answering questions about what it was like to train and how he managed to balance school and boxing, Jamal noticed a particularly quiet boy at the back of the room. Skinny as he had been, with observant eyes attentive to every word, the boy seemed to absorb everything with a familiar intensity. After the formal session, Jamal approached him, introducing himself personally. The boy, who identified himself as Deshaun, timidly admitted that he trained alone at home using internet videos because his mother couldn't take him to regular classes due to work. With an understanding smile, Jamal took a card with Ford's contact from his backpack and handed it to the boy. "Tell your mum to call this number. Say Jamal Carter referred you, they'll find a way." On the night of his first professional fight, the locker room was full of people who had been part of his journey. Ford, obviously, his mother and brothers, old colleagues from the gym, even Mr. Wilkins, now retired from the warehouse. With Cartier just a few minutes before his name would be announced, there was a knock on the door. It was Davis, who had just completed his own warm-up for the main fight of the night. Without many words, the champion entered and handed Jamal a small box. Inside it, a pair of customized professional competition gloves with the initials JC in gold and a message embroidered on the inside, "From one Baltimore dreamer to another. Keep inspiring." When Jamal finally entered the arena, under the spotlights and deafening applause, he was no longer alone. He carried with him every person who had contributed to his journey, every obstacle overcome, every lesson learned. His opponent, an experienced fighter from Philadelphia with a respectable record, seemed confident and slightly disdainful of the rookie. As the referee gave the final instructions in the center of the ring, Jamal briefly looked at the front row, where his mother and Ford watched side by side, and then to the corridor where Davis waited for his own fight, watching attentively. 7 years had passed since a desperate boy had invaded a room to ask for an autograph in his worn notebook. Now, with gloves firmly adjusted and a heart overflowing with determination, Jamal Carter was ready not just to fight, but to continue. The story that had begun with a simple request for gloves and that had moved much more than the boxing world, it had transformed lives, starting with his own. The bell rang, and with the same determination that had brought him there, Jamal advanced to the center of the ring, not just as a boxer, but as a living symbol that dreams, when fueled with hard work and genuine support, can truly become reality. The fight was a spectacle of technique and heart. In the first rounds, Jamal faced his opponent's experienced aggression with a patience that impressed the commentators. "He fights like a 10-year veteran, not like a rookie," observed one of them, as Jamal absorbed the initial pressure, studying his opponent's patterns. In the fourth round, the transformation was visible. Like a predator that finally decides to attack, Jamal changed the pace, using quick combinations that left his opponent disoriented. The Baltimore crowd exploded when, in the fifth round, a perfectly timed left hook found the opponent's chin, sending him to the canvas for the final count. The celebration that followed was restrained. Jamal helped his opponent up, showing the respect that Ford had always emphasized as the mark of a true champion. In the post-fight interviews, when asked about his inspiration, Jamal didn't hesitate. "It all started with a pair of gloves and someone who believed in me before I knew how to believe in myself. Davis showed me that it doesn't matter where you come from, but where you're going and who you help along the way." The reporter, visibly moved, asked about his future plans. With a calm smile, Jamal replied, "I want to be a world champion someday, of course. But more importantly, I want to ensure that for every child like me in Baltimore, there's someone willing to extend a hand. Sometimes, all we need is a chance." In the weeks following his debut victory, Jamal divided his time between training for his next fight and visits to schools and community centers in Baltimore. During one of these visits, he met Deshaun again, the quiet boy from the primary school, now training regularly at Ford's gym. The boy had brought 3 other friends from the neighborhood, all now participating in the scholarship program that had been expanded thanks to the documentary's success and the partnerships formed. "So you changed my life," Deshaun said shyly, proudly showing his own training gloves. "One day I'll do the same for someone else." Jamal smiled, recognizing in the boy the same fire he had felt at 11 years old. On a quiet afternoon, after a particularly intense training session, Jamal returned to the small apartment where his family still lived. now much more comfortable thanks to the improvements they had been able to make over time. On the living room shelf, in a specially made glass box to preserve them, were the first gloves Davis had given him, now a bit worn by time, but with the signature and message still clearly visible. Keep your hands up and your feet moving. Never give up. Next to them, framed, was the photo of their meeting at the New York Film Festival, and more recently, one of the hug they exchanged in the ring after Jamal's first professional victory. They weren't just mementos of important moments. They were tangible chapters of a story that continued to be written, inspiring others to begin their own journeys, transforming a simple request for boxing gloves into a legacy much greater than anyone could have imagined. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories.